Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Severna Republic, Building the Empire. Okay, so in the first episode, I basically just went over the very vague outlines of what I plan to do with this republic, and that I want to get to over 300,000 people whilst running a functioning republic, and also trying to keep performance at a acceptable level by making sure that every vehicle on the road is absolutely necessary, and really trying to cut back on those and making distribution a lot more efficient by using railways and storage facilities in town centres, so that the stores and shops don't have to have trucks going to them literally every 5 minutes. I'm going to try and work something out with waste collection as well, because I know that can also be a nightmare. So I've laid the bones down now of this iteration of Severna Republic. So just a few details seen flashing up on screen there. They're just what we went over in the last one. So first of all, I build an oil field. So find where my oil is. This is why I don't have research set. So oil pumps. Oil is obviously one of the easiest things. You can just pump out of the ground. It can just go straight onto a ship. You don't need any workers at all on that. So I get that set up immediately so that all my tanks start filling up, so that when the citizens do arrive on the island and they start working in the refinery, there's a nice buffer already in place there waiting in the tanks, and we're not going to have to, it's not going to be constantly chasing its tail. There's a nice good amount of oil in the tanks across the oil field there. So we've got the 3 tanks here, which basically, to make sure that you're not running out of oil. I will go over this later on in the video, but there's a certain way I like to set up the oil tanks to make sure that everything, it gets exported once everything else is completely full, which I imagine everybody does anyway, but some people might not think of it like that. So this is what I'm going to go over in the next video. But this one, so just laying down the bones, and I'll just show you around what I've got at the moment. So the oil field and the power plant's all set up and ready to go there once we get the workers. So the backup windmills here, so if for some reason you stop producing fuel for the power plant and that goes offline, the oil will keep on flowing via the windmills, so you're not going to have like a total permanent shutdown of everything. But make sure that you do link them together with a substation, and use substations. Otherwise, the power goes up and down like crazy, and you'll get flashing street lights. And I don't know about you, but that drives me absolutely insane when you're looking at the city at night and you've got flickering street lights. It enrages me. So yeah, so always make sure that you've got those set up with the power plant, the power substations. So even if you've got no workers, you can start exporting oil straight away as soon as you've laid down the foundations. You don't have to wait until all of your citizens move in, because obviously that requires a dozen other things, whereas you've just got this base. So if it's taking you a little while to get set up, remember that prices do inflate over time. So even though you might have 10-20 million rubles now, and it seems like that can buy a lot, if you just sit there and let the game run without exporting anything or without earning any money, then your buying power is going to decrease rapidly. So do remember that. And also the world market prices, they do reflect supply and demand. So if you're exporting loads and loads of oil, that'll do you right for a little while, but sooner or later the prices of that will begin to go down, especially if you're exporting a lot of it onto the world market. Obviously, supply and demand, like the real world, the price of oil will go down. So make sure you diversify your economy as soon as you can, really. The more diversity you've got, the more things you're exporting, usually means that the happier your citizens will be, and also you will be shielding your economy against any particular price shocks in the world prices. So once you've got that set up, the next thing you need to look at is the water, heating and sewerage, because really without those things you can't run the republic. Your citizens will be very, very cross with you, and they will start leaving, and then once you've not got any money to invite foreign workers into the country, really the only way out of that would be, sort of more unrealistic things, such as, injecting your economy, printing some money, or taking out a loan if you're okay with that. But that's something you really want to avoid, because I do think that kind of spoils the fun of the game. So you got your water set up. So the big treatment plants require 2 of the pumping stations. You can use the small pumping stations, which are handy for, I use them for my concrete plants, things like that, because they don't need workers, but they don't put out a lot of water. You will need the ones the large ones that the workers work in. So as you can see there, I like to run the pipes in their own little channels in between roads. I mean, you can build sports facilities and decorative items above them, but I do like to keep them clear of any other major infrastructure, because if you do have to you will have to make upgrades to your networks later on in the game, and it just makes it a lot easier if you know where everything is going. Don't get me wrong, when I'm building a lot of stuff and I just need to get it done, I do let this slip, but this is obviously one of the things that in this play I am really going to try and avoid, and try and stick to my own rules all the way through this playthrough, at least until I can't anymore. So I always keep the water treatment plants and the sewage treatment plants on opposite sides of the town. Just makes it easier to work with, and obviously it will keep your freshwater supply nice and pollution free. Try not to build within, I tend to not build within 100 meters of my pumping stations, just to make sure that water does stay nice and clean. You can keep an eye on it, and you can always move it later on, but yeah. The next thing you want to make sure you won't need this until the winter, technically. The game, because you start the game in May when you have the seasons set up, so you won't need your heating until the winter, but you might as well pull it in the same time as you do your water and your sewage, because in the cold months it's just as vital as those things, and it's a very difficult thing to try and sort of retroactively build in later on in the game. So even though you don't need it, you might see it as a big outlay now, trust me, it'll be more of an outlay when all your citizens are leaving because their families are freezing to death. Yes. So as I mentioned before with the size grid that I use, this is particularly because of the walking distance of citizens. If you make sure that you strategically place your bus stations, as I have around there, with one central one in the middle where your stores and shops will go, and just create the routes of the buses go in, one at the top 2, one at the bottom 2, both meeting in the middle there. More or less, your citizens will be able to reach everywhere within that little square, usually on foot. They won't even need to get on the bus. They will be able to walk. They will just take them a bit more time. So, before I get the citizens in, I'm going to begin exporting the oil. So the refinery and the power plant there aren't currently functional, but they will be once the citizens move in, and that will get up and running pretty quickly. But in the meantime, I am running power through the windmills so that the oil is pumping out of the ground and filling up our storage tanks ready for when they do arrive. But obviously what you don't want to do is set up your pumping harbours so that they're taking the oil before it's managed to reach the refinery or your heating plant. So always make sure that you're giving them either their own completely independent storage tanks, or that you're using the priorities in the actual pumping stations, not the actual pumps that are pumping the oil out, but the in-between ones, the pipe pumping stations. Make sure that you're using the priorities on those, and that the pipe that goes to the pumping harbour is literally the last one in the chain. And what I tend to do is have, as you know, the tanks won't flow into another tank without a pump until they are full. So in between your last oil tank and the pumping stations, don't put a pump immediately after it, so that it will only discharge into the next tank along, which is going off towards your harbour, once it's full, essentially. And that's a really, foolproof way, as far as I can tell, of making sure that you're never exporting a resource that you need. Because once that refinery is working, the bitumen and the fuel that will be produced, is worth twice as much, as even sometimes more than that, than the actual oil. The oil needs to be the bedrock of your economy. If everything else fails, you've got that oil going out. This is different when you've got land connections to the borders, because you can export power then, which is a lot easier. And that's a very good way of making energy. If you're not too bothered about it being an island, you can export electricity, which is also a really good money maker, and probably more than, well, it is more than oil, because it's a secondary resource. But that's not an option when I play islands, so it's not something that I do very often. But yeah, that is an option as well to do. But remember, you do need power plants running then, so it's not quite as foolproof as oil with a few windmills, but it's a good strategy. I have done it in the past. Being an island, it does bring certain challenges. You can't export things half as easily, and sometimes if you've not got your ships set up correctly, they can just, especially your pumping harbours, because if it can't export fuel or can't export bitumen and shuts down, they will just start. If you've got wait until loaded, they will just sit there doing nothing for ages and ages and ages. And you might not notice that, and over time you can end up losing a lot of money. And it's usually only once things start to really go wrong that you finally notice that, and then it's too late. So here, I'd realised actually myself when I was setting this up that I had not made sure that the oil tank wouldn't pump out even if it wasn't full. So I'm just correcting that now, just making sure that the refinery is the second to last stop on the oil's way to the harbour. The heating plant has its total own supply from the oil pumps going into its own tank, because that is absolutely vital. If that stops working in the middle of winter, then all your citizens will freeze. So don't allow that to happen under any circumstances, because it's not good. And I'm also setting up the priorities here as well as a sort of another layer of protection against the state running out of oil. So yeah, that should all be done now. That should work correctly. But it's quite hard to tell at the moment, because the refinery is actually full of oil. The tanks have been filled up entirely on the actual building footprint itself. So all buildings obviously have their own internal storage as well. Some more than others, some more practical than others, but it's not always a given there. So this is pretty much the conclusion of episode 2. These all seem really short to me, but I think that this is the issue that I actually make. I end up leaving it ages and ages and ages in between videos, so that by the time it comes to actually I get around to making a video, so much has happened that it's just like, it would take me so long to go through and remember all the individual steps that I take during construction. And I'm just laying down now the drinking, even though there's no citizens yet, I'm just getting the drinking water ready for when the workers do come in, which will be in the next video. So the next one I'm going to start laying down shops, parks, hospitals, all that kind of thing. I don't know whether I will have citizens in by winter of this year. I might wait till 1961 to get them in. I might just get through one winter and set up the technical services and the hospitals, police stations, get everything literally ready to go, so that once the citizens move in, it's literally the Republic is complete and ready for them. Because I want to see how much I am making from the export of the oil. So you can see there, so all the other storages upstream of the pumping harbour are actually full, and it's only once that they start to dip down that it will actually stop going to there. And there is another 2 oil tanks in between the last oil tank that goes to the refinery and the pumping harbour, just so there's still those 2 tanks. I mean, they will empty pretty quickly with 2 ships there, but it just gives you that little bit of extra chance to quickly shut the pipe off. And you can always, luckily these pumping harbours do work both ways, so you can just turn around the ship, bring it back straight into port, and then it will pump the oil back into the system if you set that up to do that. At the moment I've not got many oil pumps. Once that refinery gets burning, the oil will go down pretty quickly. At the moment there's nothing else using it, so I will be able to export quite a bit there. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this second video, and the third one I'm going to try and get that out later on today. I'm going to try and play catch up, because I know I've promised you guys this series 2 or 3 times now, and I've never got past the second episode. That will change. So thank you very much for watching the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good day. Ta-da!